Right, done the filling on the bulkhead. It's not Rolls Royce perfect, but it will do the job. Certainly along this leading edge here, where the panel's spliced on. I'm quite pleased with that. So once I filled it, flatted it back, I've just lobbed another coat of filler primer over the top. Should flat that back and then top coat it tomorrow. Quite pleased with that. Doing the job, isn't it? I reckon. Right, and then once it's top coated, that can go on. Woo-hoo! Okie dokie, Sandy, hubs. So this hub here, as we know, has some rust on the chrome ball. It's not looking its best. This one, similarly, has rust on the chrome ball, and without even moving it, it's just emptied itself out on the floor over the last 2 weeks. So I'm going to have to replace these swivels. I'm not happy with them. It's just a bodge by putting gaiters and things over the top of them. So I bought a pair of swivel ball kits from Paddock Spares. All this lot comes from Paddock Spares, and they kind of give you everything you need in here, including the swivels and the sweep seal. Sweep seal. Oh. So I'm going to do these next. While I got the hubs all off and everything, I might do the dampers as well at the same time. Just undo the dampers and see if they're any good. And let's get these things done. They're fairly straightforward to do these, to be honest. So I'll undo the brake line up here. In fact, I'll undo the brake line there. Take the whole brake back plate off with all the drums and everything on it. The hub needs to come off the front. It's not a huge issue. I've got new seals. Oh. Take the flexi off. Get that out of the way. And then once I've got the hub plate off, well, let me just, I'll just walk you through it. Shall I walk you through it? I'm going to walk you through it. Right, let's unbox this box of joy and wonderment. We've got some one stop, which I won't bother putting one stop in there, because if I'm doing all this, I'm going to put it back to oil, EP oil. I've got sweep seal, got sweep seal retainer. We've got the swivel ball itself, which is going to be, I'll take it out of the bag in a second. We've also got a pack of gaskets for the various hubs and things. It looks like we've got some shims for the, no, we've got lock tabs for the various parts, the brake hubs and so forth. We have got a swivel pin. Very nice looking swivel pin, this one. Look at this. Oh, yes. A swivel pin and bearing and shims. Good, so we can set the preload on that, that's good. O-ring. And looks like a swivel pin bearing. Yes, I would say swivel pin bearing. So it looks like there's a bearing in a bush. Got me vinegar and brown paper. Oh, that's fine. Ah, yes. Oh, I like that. Ah, most pleased. Yes, that'll do. Right, so let's get this thing stripped down now. So we'll start by stripping everything down. I'm just going to wrap that back up and pop it in there, because I don't want to lose all this stuff. That can all go over there. We'll start by getting drum off. So let me go and find tripod. There we go. Right, so drum. It's held on by 2 or 3 screws. How many have we got on there? 1, 2, might be third one on here. Ah, there's a third one down there. Impact drivers. If you haven't got one of these, get one. They're very good. The idea is you put it into the screw head, you turn it into the orientation of an undo, and if you're finding a screw is tight, then, oh, that one did turn actually, but what you basically do is you get it pointing in the right direction and give the end a sharp tap, and it shocks screws and fixings undone. This particular one I've had for about 1,000 years, and it comes with various fixes. I must have had this as long as I've been working on cars. This one is a Talco impact driver, made in Taiwan. There you go. 1,000 years I've had this thing, and it's just the most useful tool I've got in my toolbox. Because, oh, apart from the hammer, of course, that goes without saying. Right, so I'll undo these 3 chaps here. What I need to do is find a box to put all these bits into, but at the moment it's just a case of just being organised. I might need to back off the brake adjusters. Because I fitted this thing out with new everything. So we should be fairly straightforward in undoing the brake adjusters. But they're on the back here. There's one there, and there's one on the other side down here, right at the bottom. And you just wind them, and it slackens the brakes off. Because obviously we haven't got the luxury of discs on one of these things. Although I suppose there's no reason why you couldn't put a Range Rover axle on the front of one of these things and strap it onto the springs. There must be a way of doing that. Because you just don't need the spring plate, do you? I wonder if they're the same width. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Because I know people do all sorts of funny things. They put coil springs on these. I don't really understand why at all, but I've not even adjusted the brakes on this thing, so this thing comes off more or less by hand. Comes off totally by hand. Here he comes. Right, he's off. So we'll put him up there. We'll put the screws back into the holes so we don't lose them. Right, so that's that. Now, next thing I'm going to do is get the hub off here, which involves taking off the drive plate or the lock plate. Underneath here there will be a split pin, castled nut, undo that, take off the bolts here, drive plate will come out. Then underneath that will be the large lock nut to undo the hub. You probably don't really need to watch me do that, do you? Please say you don't. I'll get the hub off and I'll come back to you. Right, so we've pulled the split pin out, taken the nut, castled nut off the outside there, undone the bolts for the drive plate, and we'll just put a little jemmy behind him and pivot him forwards, and that's all you need really. That then comes off in your hand for now. Now, underneath that, we will have the hub nuts. So we have got a large nut on the outside, followed by a lock tab, followed by a nut on the inside. Now, if you haven't got one and you're working on Land Rovers, any Land Rover, get yourself a box spanner. They're like a tenner, and it saves you having to use chisels to undo these bloody nuts. Now what I need to do first of all is I need to get the screwdriver in there and just bang that lock tab back. Always use new lock tabs, don't fuck around with old lock tabs. I keep piles of them in stock just because I often have to. Now you'll notice at this point that the hub is turning independently of the axle. The axle goes on that, it's just the hub. Right, so we'll take this off and then get the whole hub off once these two nuts are undone. There we go, so outer nut is off, lock washer is off, and you see I had to kind of mangle that a little bit to get it out. And then inner nut comes off. You see it's come with the hole, so you can put a length of threaded rod or a bar or something through it to give it a little bit of extra purchase. Sometimes I use like a big pipe wrench on these flats up here. That can also work. The only problem I've ever had with these things is the lock nuts can appear to be seized locked solid, and that's because that lock plate down there deforms and holds the nut in place. Right, so we'll take that off. There's the last nut. It's actually quite useful, by the way. If you ever find these like plastic filing boxes, find them at car shows or whatever, grab hold of them. Doesn't matter what sort of quality they are, they're really good at keeping things like this organised and clean as well. Because you clean them out and they're dead easy. Right, now we'll pull the whole hub forwards and off. The bearing is still on it, and there we are. The whole hub is off with the bearing. There's the outer bearing there. Oh, and also don't forget the spacer. So there's a spacer on that as well. Now, next thing to undo, first of all clean this crap up here. Next thing to undo is to undo the lock tabs for the brake back plate. 6 of them, undo those, and the whole back plate should come straight off the hub. So let me get on with that and not perform to the camera like a clapping seal, and I'll come back to you. Naturally, it's important to coat the fucking bolts with bathroom sealant when you put them in. What the fuck? Right, okay, one undone. I've undone the lock tabs and one undone. 6 to go. More bathroom sealant, and then I think the stub axle is probably going to come off at the same time, but we'll see. Back plates come off intact, as you see, with all the brake shoes and everything on it, so that's fairly straightforward. Locking tabs all had bathroom sealer on it. Great. Top tip on this, by the way, is when you're undoing these, undo the last two. Sorry, undo the bottom two last. And you can see there that the one stop is just dribbling out. So now there should be nothing holding this stop axle on apart from bathroom sealant. So I'm going to give him a whack with the nylon hammer, which is around somewhere. There he is. Don't use metal on this. I'm just looking at this stub axle. This face up here is where the seal mates onto, and it's all right actually. There's no ridges on it. I can see it's just worn. So I think that's all right. You can see already the amount of sloop that's come out. Let's give him a tap while we're on camera. What's the worst that can happen? There we go. Nice bead of bathroom sealer. Oh, it's always beats using a gasket. It really does. I mean, never use a gasket where you can get bathroom sealer in. That'll get a good clean up in a minute. That can sit up there. I mean, yeah, it's just... I don't understand why anyone... I mean, everyone should use bathroom sealer. Now, does the drive shaft now come right out? It should do, and here it comes. Our drive shaft is now out. Let's stand him on there. I'm going to give that a thorough good clean out in a minute, but I want to... A fucking mess I've just made. What a twat. I need to give him a thoroughly good clean out. I'll open the drain plug, which probably wouldn't have been a bad idea before I'd started doing this. Undo the drain plug and drain the hub down. Right, next we need to get the hub itself off. So there's going to be a few things that are involved in this. First of all, clearing all this mess on the floor so I don't walk it all over the place. Secondly, I need to undo the swivel seal retaining plate off the back. There's a series of bolts around the back there, probably 10mm. When I've got the swivel seal loose, then I'll undo these 4 bolts on the top, which are the top swivel pin retaining bolts. Once the top swivel pin's out, they come off exactly like a Range Rover hub does, or swivel housing comes off. Just pull it off the top and drop it off the bottom. Exciting stuff, eh? Oh yes. Bearings in the bottom there, with its associated pin. I'll give it a good clean up in the parts washer before I go any further. The sweep seal on the back there was seized in solid, and you can see the amount of rust around here as well. And even on the inside there's a coating of rust over it, so it's probably about time this thing was changed. Now the next thing to do is to unbolt the swivel ball from the axle casing. And it's these bolts here. There should be 6 or 7 of them, I don't know. Later Land Rovers had 7, and I think these guys had 6. We'll find out in a second. Anyway, because the bolt protrudes through the back of the nut, and they're nylocks as well, first of all I'm going to go at it with the wire brush attachment on here. Give them a bit of lube, give them a fighting chance to get undone, but there's a gasket that sits between those 2 faces there. And then this can be cleaned up and turned into an ashtray or something. It'd probably be better at it than keeping oil in the swivel housing. Now bear in mind, these things, I don't know how much they're supposed to take actually, we'll look it up in a second, but a lot more than was in here. There wasn't a huge amount at all in here, and I'll probably need to check the axle level as well, because I suspect that the gasket that's in the middle there has disappeared, if there even is one. I don't know. Range Rovers, they had a gasket in there that the drive shaft went through the middle of. Not a gasket, a seal, or a seal goes in the middle of where the drive shaft goes in here. I'm rabbiting. Right, I'm going to battle with these Freddies now. This top pin though was bonius dryus. And that's probably not that great, is it? It has got a hole in the bottom of it where I guess once it thrashes around lube goes in there, but yeah, not the best. Not the best. The pin itself was alright, but I suspect things were starting to wear on it. I'll give that a clean up. We'll assess it for grooves, but I'm going to replace... Have I got a new top pin? Oh, I've got a new round top pin. And the new housing. There's the housing, you see, that goes in underneath there, with the hole in the bottom. And I've got a new top pin, so we'll put the new top pin housing, new bottom bearing on. I won't change the bottom pin because they never, ever, 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 ever have worn in all of them I've ever done, the bottom pin never wears. It's the bearing you need to replace, which is just on there. We'll take that apart in a second as well. Right, let me crack on with getting this swivel housing off. Swivel ball, sorry, the swivel housing is off. Swivel ball off. I'm not going to video it because there'll be a lot of swearing, I'm pretty sure of that. Right, so there were 6 bolts. All of them had kitchen sealer on them, and I'm anticipating there's going to be a load of kitchen sealer up here as well. So all I really do now, having undone them all, is give them a little tap, and he should start to come off. I haven't got my fucking gloves on now. I'm going to get covered in shit. But basically, there we go, it's off. Now, one thing that's worth bearing in mind on these is you can put the swivel on upside down. So if you're replacing it, you really want to kind of understand that I think it's the top edge is the narrowest. So let me clear my ends up first of all. Here we go, here's the new one. You can see on the new one, it cants over towards the left. So the left side is shorter than the right side. Now, because there's only 6 bolts on these things, rather than the 7 that are on the newer ones, they do cant. So basically what you need to do is make sure that the shortest edge is on the upper side. So when you put it on, otherwise what you'll end up having is a severe camber on the wheel, and you'll be cursing yourself as having to undo it all fucking again. Although strictly speaking, all you have to undo is undo the bolts and swivel them around. No, you'll need to do more than that because the swivel pins will be wrong. So yeah, you'll be cursing yourself. So make sure you put it on the right way around, won't you? Right, now, the old housing is down there. I need to press in various parts and bits and bobs, but I'm going to do that after I've had a spot of lunch, because I think lunch is called for now. I took the damper off because it was a lot easier to access the rearmost bolts that were hiding down there. Plus I wanted to check the damper out anyway, because although it looks absolutely gank, it has got a reasonable amount of force left in it. Let me just grip the bottle with my feet and pull him back out again. Might be a bit too much force in there, but it certainly compresses and uncompresses. You might end up better than the blue box of joy and wonderment items I've got on the shelf. I'll need to get both dampers off the front before I make a judgment on dampers, but they don't need to go on till after the hubs anyway. Right, there is a seal in here, but it's not included in my rebuild kit, which is a bit disappointing. So I'm going to have to see if I can find out where that seal comes from, what the part number is, and see if I've got another one. I've got tons of seals around and about, but that's annoying. I've cleaned up the housing, so the housing cleaned up nicely. Look at that, got all that crap off it. Anyway, mud and stuff, that's what it looked like. Well, that one wasn't quite as bad as this one. This one was absolutely caked in grease and solidified mud and all sorts of shit. But it's cleaned up nicely. I've cleaned up all the gasket mating faces. Drive shafts up here, universal joint on him is good. Happy with that, there's no problems at all there. Don't generally think these things fail because they're kind of immersed in oil all the time. Press the bearing cases in, a bit like doing the hubs. It's fairly straightforward stuff. I put the tapered seat for the bottom roller bearing in, tapered bearing in first, because that then allowed this thing to kind of sit level on the platform for you to push the other side in. That's done now, so let's let you off a little bit. Take you out before you fall on the floor. Again, it's usual sorts of things to check that the seat has gone right in. It has, and it has. Can't see it go any further than that. Oh yes. Right, this fucker can come on. So we'll find the gasket. The bearing goes in there. That's good. We'll put him on the pin in the housing in a minute, but in the meantime, you can just sit on there. You want gaskets, which will be in this bag of joy and wonderment. I will use a little bit of gasket sealer on here to hold it all together. What I'm not going to do though is use bathroom silicone sealer, because that's just stupid. There's no gaskets in this thing at all when I took it apart, so someone's obviously taken it apart to sort a leak out. Hasn't had the 12 pence gaskets and just sealed it all up. I mean, it did the job. It wasn't actually leaking out of the gasket joints. It was leaking past the sweep seal. Sooty and sweep seal. Right, now, when it comes to sweep seals, what you want to make sure is that it all goes on the right way around, because you've got to put it onto the cup before you put the cup onto the axle. So, like we've got down here, we can see that the sweep seal and the retainer is still on the cup. So I need to put those on before it goes anywhere. And then we can bolt him up. It does quite please me, really, that a 1980 Land Rover has not succumbed to European pressure from the EU, common market, whatever they called it at the time, and that we still have BSF threads on our Land Rovers. That's just outstanding, isn't it? Anyway, they're all on. I'll replace the lock nuts, I promise. Right, let's get on with this swivel housing now. So basically the swivel housing will need to go back over the top. There he is. You can see a G and Blue still here waiting. A G and Blue, the fuel tank is over there. It's been sloshed, ready to go on, but I can't fill it with petrol for at least 24 hours. So I'm getting on with this today. Fun, I like doing this shit. Been no need for me to remove the bottom pin, because like I say, they never wear. I don't think I've ever found one yet that's worn. Anyway, that can go on there. That's the new bearing. I might pack him with a bit of grease first of all. But yeah, he goes on nicely, doesn't he? Fits nicely on the pin. There's no need to change that pin at all. And then what we have is the sweep seal on the back, holds it, and on the front there's a gasket which sits between the stub axle and the brake back plate. Sorry, it sits between this and the stub axle, and then the brake back plate goes over the top of all that. It's going to look all right in there. I'm quite pleased with this so far. And then once it's all together, then you paint it. Doing the swivel preload, so basically what you want to do is you want to put the bearing in the bottom, swivel pin in the top, load of shims between the top plate and the hub carrier, or the swivel housing. No seal on the back. Touch yourself a nice little spring balance onto the steering arm and give it a tug. Well, don't tug it, but just pull it. So that's needing 20 pounds of force to move it. The specification is 14 to 16 pounds. So, couldn't find any torque wrench setting for these bolts on the top here, so I used 50 foot-pounds. Comments below if you think that's too little, too much. But what I basically need to do now is add more shims. So what I did, I put every single shim in there that came with the new pin. However, we've got all the old pins, all the old shims on the old pin. Here they all are, look at them all, lovely. So we'll clean these up and we'll wedge one in there. It's probably going to need to be quite a fat one though, because I need to bring this down by at least 4 pounds of force required. It's quite, I mean, that is too tight. Okay. Might put a bit of lube on the, I'll put lube on the bearing and I'll put lube on the pin as well. But let me undo this again and try adding shims in here. I might need to measure the thickness and so forth and be a bit scientific about it, but we should get this sorted. Okay, lobbed the fattest shim that I had in there, and that's coming around at 4 pounds now. So I reckon if I halve the width of the shim that I've just put in there, so whatever the thickness of the shim that I've just put in, work out what half that is using the vernier, put those shims in, and I reckon we'll be there. So just need to undo these 4 bolts on the top again and I can do that. Quite a tough old field to it. 4. Right, now. That's actually 14. 12 now. So we need to take a tiny shim out, I think. Taking the shims out tightens it up, putting them back in again loosens things up. So I'm going to take the thinnest shim out. Say that because it's just starting to get chilly. Right, let's see what that does. That's still too loose. Take that other skinny shim out. Wiggle it back and forth just to bed it in. Now, no power steering on this. Put it right on this. 14. I'm going to leave it at that, 14. Well, quite a lot of force really to pull that around. 14. And again. 14. 14. That'll do. Right, so now, lock tabs need to go under there. So I wanted to take 0.6mm out. How much did I end up taking out? I've just sort of halved the number. I had a high point and a low point. I took out, in the end, I took out 1.05. Call it 1 mil. We took a mil out in the end. Keep all those on there. Put these on. Pull it just a little bit harder, just so that the locking tab is on a flat. That's good. Right, now let's check that. Now see what he's doing. 14 pounds. So that's how you do those. Right, so now we need to put this rear seal on. He goes in, and then we've got like a blanking or catch plate that goes over the top of it. There are 6 bolts that hold it on, but one of them's longer. The long one needs to go onto this side, and that acts as the steering stop, and you've got to measure that. So make sure you've got the long bolt nearest the tab that comes out the side. Right, so let's assemble this thing up. Before you put the stub axle on, don't forget to put the drive shaft in. Easily done. Right, so Mr. Drive Shaft goes back in and should locate on the splines. Sometimes it can be a bit of an arse. Oh, there he goes. He's on his way in. There he goes. In. Right, so drive shaft's in. clean hands. If you forget to put the drive shaft in, then it all has to come apart, you see. Especially if you've kind of done all this work. You're not going to want to do it all again, are you? Right, now we've already got the gasket in place. We'll put the stub axle over the top and really just use a bolt or two to make sure that we've got the bolt hole lined up. Right, that one goes in. Does this one go in? It does. Right, got all the bolts already lined up with their respective tabs. What I find with these tabs, bend them before you put them in. For some reason they're never quite the right length. I don't know why. I've got some thread lock here, just as a belt and braces. I know we're using locking tabs, but no reason why we can't use thread lock as well. Bang it on. He's on. Right, and then brake back plates kind of lines up. Again, sits in there quite happily. Let's put the first two bolts in. Just a case of rotating until you get a bolt through, then you know the other bolt's going to go in as well then. Right, so that was caught on the thread. That's the bottom two, which tend to be the most inaccessible ones because, well, just because. And then let's have two on the side. You don't have to thread lock the whole of the shank or the whole threaded part of the bolt. It's only the tip really that is going to grip. If there's any excess on the tip, it's going to wind in on the threads as it goes in anyway. Right, that goes in. And last one. It's as easy as this really. Just don't forget to put the drive shaft in. For now. Oh, right. Hub next. So we want the box with the hub. That's all crap. Tidy workplace is a tidy workplace and all that bollocks. Here's the hub. Right, now, be careful with the wheel bearing. Let's put the hub on. That's on. Right, I'm not worried about lock plate yet. That can go on in a minute. What I'm worried about is these are the lock tabs, and I haven't got the other lock tab out. That's another thing they haven't put in the kit. I got to write to these guys. Why would you not put lock? You put all the other lock tabs in. I'll double check, make sure they haven't, or I haven't misplaced it. Box spanner, where are you? What have I done with the box spanner? thought it was in the box. Da, 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 da. No, it doesn't look like they do put a locking tab in there, which I think is a bit shitty. Right, where's my box spanner? What have you done with the box spanner? There it is. Right. What I'm going to need to do is get the dial gauge out and double check the end flow on this. I'm not sure I've got the patience to do it right now because it's getting cold and I've got to go around the block and pay Graham 60 quid for all those defender bits. But that's how you do it. But I'm going to need to get hold of the lock tabs because this kit doesn't supply them, which I think is a bit piss poor. We can put the drum back on though. There's no reason why I can't put the drum back on. 3 screws. Drum goes on that way round. I think it's that way round. Yes, it's that way round. There it is. 3 screws.